stop lying. Just for 1 minute. Stop lying. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The lie that you're fine when you're falling apart inside. The lie that you'll start tomorrow when you've been saying tomorrow for 5 years. The lie that you're too busy when you spent 3 hours on your phone yesterday. The lie that other people have it easier when you have no idea what their struggles are. The lie that you're not smart enough, not talented enough, not ready enough. When the truth is you're just scared. Scared of trying and failing. Scared of succeeding and having to maintain it. Scared of being seen for who you really are. Scared of wanting something deeply and not getting it. So you've built this elaborate system of excuses and distractions and semi-acceptable mediocrity, and you call it life. But it's not life, it's hiding. And you can't hide from yourself forever because eventually you run out of places to run. You know that moment, don't you? It's 3 in the morning and you're lying there in the darkness. The television is off, your phone is finally quiet, the music has stopped, and there it is, that voice in your head, asking you the questions you've been dodging all day, all week, maybe all year. Is this really the life you want to be living? When did you become this person? What happened to those dreams you used to have? That voice, it's not your enemy. It's the most honest friend you'll ever have. And the fact that you only hear it at 3 in the morning tells you something crucial. You've been running from yourself so fast during the daylight hours that truth can only catch up with you when you're too tired to keep sprinting. Let me tell you what happens when you spend your life running from yourself. You wake up at 40, 50, 60 years old and realize you've built an entire existence around avoiding the one person you can never escape, you. You've constructed elaborate diversions, impressive distractions, and socially acceptable excuses. You've become the world's greatest escape artist, except you're both the magician and the audience. And the trick has stopped being impressive. It's just exhausting now. We're living in the golden age of self-avoidance. You can scroll through other people's lives for hours. You can binge watch entire seasons in a weekend. You can work 70 hours a week and call it ambition. You can jump from relationship to relationship and call it bad luck. You can shop, drink, eat, exercise, party, and hustle your way through years without ever stopping long enough to ask the simple question, who am I really and what do I truly want? The masks we wear have become so comfortable that we forget we're wearing them. There's the professional mask at work where you pretend to care about things that bore you senseless. There's the social mask where you laugh at jokes that aren't funny and agree with opinions you don't share. There's the family mask where you play the role everyone expects while your real thoughts remain safely locked away. You've become so skilled at being what others need that you've forgotten what you actually are. And here's the devastating part. This avoidance has a price tag that keeps growing. Your relationships never go deeper than surface level because you can't share what you won't acknowledge. Your career feels hollow because you chose it to impress others or escape something else, not because it aligns with your authentic self. Your dreams sit in a dusty corner of your mind, and every year you tell yourself, maybe next year, until the words lose all meaning. The goals you set feel empty because they're designed to prove something to people whose opinions shouldn't matter, rather than express something true about who you are. The compound effect of this avoidance is staggering. One avoided conversation becomes a pattern of conflict avoidance that destroys your relationships. One compromised value becomes a lifetime of selling yourself short. One dream deferred becomes a mountain of regret. And your body keeps the score, the tension in your shoulders, the knot in your stomach, the exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. These aren't random symptoms. They're messages from the self you've been ignoring, desperately trying to get your attention. Let me tell you about Thomas. He was a mid-level manager at a technology firm, 38 years old, climbing the corporate ladder with precision and determination, on paper. His life looked successful, nice apartment, good salary, respected position, active social life. He worked 12-hour days, networked on weekends, and his calendar was booked solid 3 months in advance. He was the picture of productivity and ambition. But Thomas had a secret. Every Sunday night, he'd sit in his car in the parking garage for 20 minutes before going up to his apartment, dreading the week ahead. Every vacation day was spent in a fog of anxiety about returning to work. Every promotion brought a brief moment of satisfaction followed by a deeper emptiness. He'd started having panic attacks in bathroom stalls during important meetings. His relationships lasted 3 months maximum because he had nothing real to offer anyone. He was too busy managing his image to share his actual self. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday afternoon when his body simply quit. Not dramatically, no heart attack or collapse. He just sat at his desk and couldn't make himself open his laptop. For 3 hours, he sat there, staring at the closed screen, and something cracked open inside him. The question came clearly, what am I running from? That evening, instead of going to the gym or meeting friends for drinks or doing anything from his usual routine of constant motion, Thomas sat in his apartment with a notebook and wrote down the truth. He hated his job and had for 5 years. He was lonely despite being constantly surrounded by people. He'd chosen his career to prove something to a father who had passed away a decade earlier. He had no idea what he actually enjoyed doing because he'd spent 15 years doing what looked impressive. He was running from the fear that without his job title and accomplishments, he was nobody. That night, Thomas stopped running. Not forever. This isn't a fairy tale, but for that one night, he sat with himself honestly. And here's what he learned. The thing he'd been running from wasn't nearly as scary as the exhaustion of running. The truth, when you finally face it, doesn't destroy you. The avoidance does. Here's the foundation principle that changes everything. You cannot outrun your shadow. It moves with you at exactly your speed in every direction you go. The life you're avoiding isn't behind you, it's inside you. And every external achievement you chase, every distraction you embrace, every excuse you manufacture is just another mile in a race that has no finish line. Because the finish line isn't out there somewhere. It's right here, in the willingness to stop moving long enough to meet yourself honestly. The paradox is this. Facing yourself is actually easier than running from yourself. Running is exhausting. Running takes constant energy, constant vigilance, constant distraction, standing still and looking in the mirror. That takes courage. But courage, once summoned, doesn't drain you, it fills you. Because on the other side of that honest look is something you've been missing. Peace, alignment, the sense that your life is actually yours. The running didn't start yesterday, it started long before you realized you were doing it. Think back to when you were a child, maybe 7 or 8 years old. You came home excited about something you'd created, something you were proud of, and someone, maybe a parent, maybe a teacher, maybe a sibling, responded with criticism instead of celebration, or worse, indifference. In that moment, a small seed was planted. Who I am naturally isn't quite good enough. How good enough? That seed grew quietly in the dark soil of your developing mind. And you started adjusting. You started performing. You started running from the authentic version of yourself toward some version you thought would finally earn approval. Society handed you the roadmap for this escape. Get good grades, go to the right school, land the impressive job, make the money, buy the house, post the pictures, collect the likes, prove your worth through external measures, because internal worth is too subjective, too uncertain, too vulnerable. We're raised in a culture that measures everything except what actually matters. Nobody taught you how to sit with yourself. Nobody taught you how to process difficult emotions. Nobody taught you that your value isn't determined by your productivity or your appearance or your bank account. So you learned to run, and you got very, very good at it. The comparison trap started early and never stopped. In school, you compared test scores. In college, you compared opportunities. In your career, you compared titles and salaries. On social media, you compare highlight reels. You're constantly measuring yourself against others. And in that measurement, you lose yourself entirely, because when you're busy trying to be better than someone else, you forget to ask whether you're being true to yourself. The race has no winners, Only exhausted participants who forgot why they started running in the first place. Let me show you the 7 most common escape routes people take, and I guarantee you'll recognize yourself in at least 3 of them. First, there's overwork and productivity addiction. You fill every moment with tasks, emails, meetings, projects. You wear exhaustion like a badge of honor. You tell everyone how busy you are, as if busyness equals importance. But here's the truth. You're not addicted to productivity, you're addicted to avoiding the quiet moments when you'd have to face what you're actually feeling. Second, there's constant relationship hopping. You move from person to person, always finding something wrong with them after the honeymoon phase ends. The real issue, when relationships deepen. They require you to be authentic, and authenticity requires knowing yourself. So you leave before things get real. Telling yourself you're looking for the right person when you're actually running from yourself. Third, there's numbing substances. Food, shopping, gambling, whatever quiets the noise temporarily. You drink to relax, but you're really drinking to forget. You eat to feel better, but you're really eating to avoid feeling at all. These behaviors aren't character flaws. They're symptoms of a deeper avoidance, a refusal to sit with discomfort long enough to understand its message. Fourth, digital distraction and endless scrolling. You check your phone 200 times a day. You watch videos of other people living lives. You read articles about how to improve yourself while doing nothing to actually improve. The screen is a portal away from your own existence, and every hour you spend there is an hour you don't spend with yourself. Fifth, shopping and material accumulation. You buy things to fill the void, believing the right possession will finally make you feel complete. New clothes, new gadgets, new furniture. The satisfaction lasts minutes, maybe days, and then you're back to feeling empty, back to shopping for the next temporary fix. Sixth, people-pleasing and external validation. You say yes when you mean no. You twist yourself into shapes to make others comfortable. You need constant approval, constant praise, constant reassurance that you're acceptable. Because if you stopped performing for others, you'd have to perform for yourself. And you're terrified you wouldn't meet your own standards. Seventh, perfectionism as procrastination. You tell yourself you'll start when conditions are perfect, when you know more, when you're ready. But perfect never comes. And that's the point. Perfectionism isn't about excellence. It's about fear. It's about never having to risk failure because you never truly begin. Behind every one of these escapes is fear. Let's name the fears honestly because they lose power when spoken aloud. You're afraid of discovering you're not enough. Not smart enough, not talented enough, not worthy enough. You're afraid that if you strip away the accomplishments and the image and the busy schedule, there's nothing substantial underneath. This fear is a liar, but it's a convincing one. You're afraid of facing past mistakes, the choices you regret, the people you've hurt, the opportunities you've wasted. It's easier to stay in constant forward motion than to look back and reckon with your history. But unexamined mistakes don't disappear. They become patterns. They repeat until you're brave enough to understand them. You're afraid of your own potential and the responsibility it brings. This sounds backward, but it's true. If you acknowledged how capable you truly are, you'd have to stop making excuses. You'd have to try. You'd have to risk disappointing yourself. It's safer to stay small and blame circumstances than to step into your full capacity and face the possibility of falling short. You're afraid of change and the unknown. Your current life might not be satisfying, but it's familiar. You know how to navigate it. You know what to expect. Change requires releasing the handrail, stepping into uncertainty, becoming someone you haven't been before. The discomfort of growth feels riskier than the pain of staying stuck. Here's the twist that keeps you trapped. Familiar discomfort becomes comfortable. You adapt to dissatisfaction. You normalize anxiety. You accept emptiness as just how life is. The pain becomes background noise. And you forget that life could feel different. You forget that peace is possible. You forget that alignment exists. Let me tell you about Linda. She changed careers every 18 months, like clockwork. Marketing, to real estate, to event planning, to consulting, to fitness instruction. Each transition came with the same story. The industry was wrong, the boss was difficult, the clients were unreasonable, the timing was bad. She had a perfectly articulated reason for every departure. And each reason pointed away from herself. The pattern she refused to see was this. Around month 14 of any job, when the novelty wore off and the real work began, when her performance was actually being evaluated and depth was required, she started looking for the exit. She blamed external factors, but the common denominator was her. She was running from the moment when she'd have to commit, when she'd have to push through difficulty, when her real abilities would be tested. The moment of recognition came during a conversation with her sister, who finally said what everyone else had been thinking. Linda, you're not unlucky with jobs. You're scared of succeeding at one. That sentence landed like a bomb. Because it was true. Linda was terrified that if she stayed somewhere long enough to truly succeed or truly fail, she'd discover something definitive about herself. The running kept everything conditional, kept all options open, kept her from ever having to face a final verdict on her capabilities. The roots of escape run deep, planted early, watered by fear, growing in the dark, but roots, once exposed to light, lose their grip. Understanding why you run is the first step toward standing still. Standing still is harder than it sounds. Your mind will offer you 1,000 reasons to postpone this confrontation. You'll suddenly remember urgent emails. You'll feel compelled to reorganize your closet. You'll convince yourself that next week would be better, next month more convenient. This resistance is normal. It's your psychological immune system trying to protect you from discomfort. But protection and growth cannot coexist. You must choose one. The art of brutal honesty begins with creating space, not physical space, though that helps, mental space, emotional space. You need 30 minutes where nobody needs anything from you, where your phone is in another room, where there's no television humming in the background, just you, a notebook, and the willingness to write down what you've been thinking but never saying. This isn't therapy, this isn't meditation, this is accounting. You're taking inventory of your actual life versus the story you've been telling about your life. Start with the questions you've been dodging. Write them at the top of the page and answer them without editing, without softening, without protecting your ego. What do you actually want from your life? Not what you should want. Not what would impress others. What do you want when nobody's watching and nobody's judging? Where are you pretending? Which relationships are draining you because they're built on false versions of yourself? What would you do differently if you weren't afraid of looking foolish? What dream have you abandoned that still whispers to you in quiet moments? These questions have answers. And those answers are already inside you. They're just buried under layers of rationalization and social conditioning. Your job isn't to figure out the right answer. Your job is to uncover the true answer. There's a difference. The right answer is what sounds good. The true answer is what you actually feel when you drop the performance. Now comes the inventory process, and this is where most people flinch. You're going to look at 5 areas of your life with complete honesty, no justifications, no comparisons to people worse off than you, just the facts of your current reality. First, your relationship with money and success. How much do you actually earn? How much do you spend? How much debt are you carrying? What does your bank account say about your priorities versus what your words say? Are you living within your means or financing an image you can't afford? Do you feel successful or are you performing success? Write down the numbers. Numbers don't lie. even when we do. Second, your relationship patterns and choices. Look at your last 3 significant relationships, whether romantic or friendship. What patterns repeat? Do you choose people who need fixing? Do you abandon ship when things get difficult? Do you give everything and receive nothing? Do you withhold your real thoughts to keep the peace? Are you more yourself or less yourself around the people closest to you? This isn't about blaming others. This is about recognizing your patterns, because patterns reveal your programming. Third, your health and body truth. Step on the scale. Look in the mirror without the filter of what you wish you saw. How do you actually feel in your body? What's your energy level? When did you last move in a way that felt good rather than punishing? What are you putting into your body and why? Are you nourishing yourself or medicating yourself with food? Your body is the physical manifestation of how you treat yourself when nobody's looking. It tells the truth about your self-respect. Fourth, your time usage reality. Track 3 days, every hour, every activity. Not what you think you do with your time, what you actually do. How many hours on social media? How many hours on work that matters versus work that's just motion? How many hours with people you love? How many hours doing things that align with your stated values? Time is the only resource you can't earn back. Where it goes reveals what you actually value, not what you claim to value. Fifth, your unexpressed dreams and desires. What did you want to be before the world told you to be practical? What career would you chase if money wasn't a factor? What would you create if you weren't afraid of criticism? What adventure would you take if you knew you couldn't fail? What version of yourself have you been suppressing to fit into a life that feels too small? Write it all down. These aren't childish fantasies. They're breadcrumbs back to your authentic self. The hardest part of this inventory isn't seeing the truth. It's breaking through the denial that's protected you from seeing it. You have defense mechanisms that activate automatically when uncomfortable truths emerge. Rationalization is the most sophisticated one. You'll explain away every uncomfortable fact with reasonable sounding logic. I'm not avoiding commitment. I just haven't found the right person. I'm not stuck. I'm being strategic. I'm not afraid. I'm being realistic. Listen to how quickly your mind offers these explanations. That speed is the tell. Truth doesn't need rapid justification. Only lies do. Then there's minimization. It's not that bad. Other people have it worse. At least I'm not. Minimization keeps you stuck because it prevents you from acknowledging that something needs to change. Your pain doesn't have to be the worst pain in the world to deserve your attention. Your dissatisfaction doesn't have to be complete misery to warrant action. Stop comparing your inside to everyone else's outside and just admit what's true for you. Projection is another favorite. You blame circumstances, other people, timing, the economy, your upbringing, your city, your industry. There's always something external to hold responsible for your internal state. And yes, external factors matter, but they're not the whole story. They're often not even most of the story. When you blame everything outside yourself, you surrender all your power to change anything inside yourself. Let me tell you about Victor. This man had a reason for everything. Why his business failed, the economy crashed at exactly the wrong time, why his marriage ended, his ex-wife had unrealistic expectations, why he was overweight, genetics and a slow metabolism, why he couldn't save money, expenses kept coming up unexpectedly, why he wasn't pursuing his passion. Nobody gets lucky breaks anymore. For 20 years, Victor had an airtight explanation for every disappointment. And every explanation pointed away from himself. And then the pressure of his failure came really big. And he was put, the conversation that changed everything happened with his oldest friend, someone who'd known him since college. They were having coffee, and Victor was explaining his latest setback, another business idea that hadn't materialized because investors didn't see the vision. His friend put down his cup and said something that shattered Victor's entire framework. You know what's interesting? In 20 years, I've never once heard you say, I messed up or I could have done that better. It's always something or someone else. Do you realize that? The words hung in the air. Victor's first instinct was to defend himself, to explain why this observation was unfair, but something stopped him. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the weight of 2 decades of excuses finally becoming too heavy to carry. He sat there, and for the first time in his adult life, he asked himself, what if I'm the common denominator in all of this? That question opened a door he'd kept locked for years. What if his business failed, not just because of the economy, but because he hadn't done the market research, hadn't managed cash flow properly, had been too proud to ask for help? What if his marriage ended, not just because of his ex-wife's expectations, but because he'd stopped showing up emotionally years before she left? What if his weight wasn't just genetics, but the result of using food to cope with stress instead of addressing the stress? What if his financial struggles weren't just bad luck, but the consequence of spending impulsively and avoiding budgets? Taking ownership didn't feel the way Victor expected. He thought it would be crushing, admitting all these failures. Instead, it felt like relief, because ownership meant power. If external forces controlled everything, he was helpless. But if his choices mattered, he could make different choices. If his actions had consequences, he could take different actions. The blame had felt safe, but it was a prison. Responsibility felt scary, but it was freedom. The confrontation with yourself doesn't destroy you, it liberates you. Because once you see clearly, you can move accurately. Once you stop lying, you can start living. The truth isn't the enemy. The avoidance of truth is the enemy. And you've spent enough years running from an enemy that was never chasing you in the first place. Awareness without action is just sophisticated procrastination. You can know everything about yourself and still live the same life if you don't change your daily behavior. Integration is where the real work begins. This is where you take the truth you've uncovered and build a life around it instead of around the illusions you've been maintaining. Building a relationship with yourself starts with treating yourself the way you'd treat someone you're trying to earn the trust of. You wouldn't lie to them constantly. You wouldn't make promises and break them daily. You wouldn't ignore their needs and expect them to thrive. Yet that's exactly what you've been doing to yourself. The morning changes everything because it sets the tone before the world gets its hands on you. Wake up 30 minutes earlier, not to be productive, but to be present. Sit with coffee or tea and ask yourself one question. What does today require of me? Not what your boss requires, not what your family expects, not what your to-do list demands. What do you require of yourself to end this day feeling aligned? Evening reflection completes the cycle. Before sleep, spend 10 minutes reviewing your day with honesty. Where did you show up authentically? Where did you slip back into old patterns? What choice are you proud of? What choice would you make differently tomorrow? This isn't about perfection or self-judgment, it's about accountability. You're keeping your word to yourself, and that compounds faster than any interest rate. Here's what changes when you start treating yourself as you would a valued friend. You stop accepting treatment from others that you wouldn't accept for someone you care about. You stop staying in situations that drain you just to avoid temporary discomfort. You stop saying yes to things that make you resentful. You start setting boundaries not from anger but from clarity. You start making choices that might disappoint others but honor yourself. This isn't selfishness, this is survival. The action protocol is simple but not easy. You set standards based on truth, not aspiration. If you've never run a mile, you don't set a goal of running a marathon next month. You run 1 mile, then 2, then 3. You build credibility with yourself through kept promises. Every time you do what you said you'd do, you strengthen the relationship with yourself. Every time you break your word to yourself, you reinforce the pattern of self-abandonment. Making decisions from authenticity means asking different questions. Not what will people think, but what do I actually want? Not what's the safe choice, but what's the true choice? Not how do I avoid failure, but what's worth trying even if I fail? Your life becomes yours again when your decisions reflect your values rather than your fears. Saying no to escape patterns requires vigilance because these patterns are grooved deep in your nervous system. When stress hits, you'll want to reach for the old numbing behaviors. When discomfort arises, you'll want to run. The difference now is awareness. You catch yourself mid-reach and ask, is this what I actually want? Or is this just familiar? Sometimes you'll still choose the escape, and that's fine, but you're choosing consciously rather than reacting automatically. And consciousness changes everything. Building life from the inside out means your external choices reflect your internal truth. Your career aligns with your values. Your relationships reflect your authentic self. Your daily schedule honors your priorities. This doesn't happen overnight. You don't quit your job tomorrow or end all your relationships today. You make small adjustments consistently. You have one honest conversation. You set one boundary. You take one risk. These small moves compound into a completely different life, given enough time and consistency. The metrics change too. You stop measuring success by what impresses others and start measuring it by internal alignment. Did I show up as myself today? Did I make choices I respect? Did I move toward what I want rather than away from what I fear? Did I keep my word to myself? These questions matter infinitely more than your job title or your bank balance or your social media following. You're not your past choices. This might be the most important sentence in this entire conversation. Every shame-filled moment, every regret, every mistake, every wrong turn, none of it defines you unless you let it. Your past is information, not identity. It shows you what doesn't work so you can try something different. The present moment is the only place where change happens, and you're standing in it right now with the power to choose differently.